When your script first gets read, it gets a grade. And at most production companies, that means recommend, consider, or pass. And on average, about 3 out of 100 get that coveted recommend, which means the story is good, the writing is good, and it would be a good fit. About 7 or 8 get a consider, which means either the story is good or the writing is good, and it's probably worth meeting the writer. The other 90 or so of the 100, they get a pass. And most of those happen before the reader even gets to the bottom of page 1. And I want you to avoid the pass and not make the mistakes that result in the pass. For the last 10 years, I've been helping writers get out of this column and into these by avoiding 12 of the most common mistakes that will make a reader pass on your script. And along the way, I'll give you some ways to fix them. And while all these are critical, the last one will literally make or break your script. Like, straight up, if you do it, it's an automatic pass. But first, let's deal with the elephant.
But what if the story is good? Won't people overlook a few mistakes on the first page?
And sure, they might. I mean, if they're in a good mood and it's their first read of the day and they've got their favorite cup of coffee or protein shake or whatever, but why give them a reason to pass on your script?
I don't understand why it's so difficult to confirm an appointment.
No, I'm so sorry, Miranda. I actually did confirm
Details
last
of
night.
your incompetence do not interest me.
Having someone read your screenplay is like a first date. You wouldn't show up not having showered or without deodorant or your clothes in disarray. I mean, this person you're meeting could be the one you're looking for. They could overlook those things. They might if they're in a good mood and excited to meet you and their nose doesn't work properly so they can't smell you since you haven't showered. But why would you give them an excuse to not like you before they get to know you? You wouldn't. And your screenplay should be no different. You want to give everyone who reads it every reason to love your script and your writing, and ultimately, you. So your task is to make sure they have a great first impression, that they are immediately sucked into the story, and that you're giving them no excuse to stop reading. But the mistakes I'm about to give you are all excuses people use to stop reading. They find them, it's an excuse. I don't need to keep reading. And it doesn't matter if you're trying to get in with an agent or manager or producer in Hollywood, or even if you're just pursuing independent producers for an indie film. They read scripts too. They don't want inferior scripts, and the mistakes I'm mentioning will kick your script in either place. So brush the hair, take a shower, put on clean clothes, and get your screenplay into shape by avoiding these mistakes. The first one, starting in the wrong place. On a typical day for you, when do you first encounter something interesting happening in your day? I mean, my guess is most of you have morning routines. Maybe you're getting up and making the bed or getting breakfast, working out, taking a shower, doing reading or journaling, just getting your day going. And if your mornings are like mine, they are super boring, super routine. And yet, the cliche to start a screenplay is on the main character waking up and getting the day started. Boring. But don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying if you don't do that, so you don't have a wake-up scene, that you're fine, because you still may be violating the getting up principle, which is this. If the first scene doesn't have anything happening or going on that's interesting, you're starting in the wrong place. And I realize you want to set things up, and that's fine. But your first task is to pull me into the story, not to set things up for the rest of the story. Get the party started. Otherwise, you're already flirting with the dreaded pass, and the reader is maybe one line into your script. Mistake number 2, failing to ground the reader. And this specifically includes 2 things. First, you must give the reader something familiar. I don't care if you're writing a sci-fi or historical romance, okay? One of the earliest images should be something familiar. Let the reader feel like they are in good hands and that they can know they can settle in for a good ride. And I know you want to be clever, but be clever later. Give the reader something they can latch onto first, and then go and be all kinds of clever. And the second part of grounding your reader, you should be giving a sense of the rules of the world and what it's like. Are there cell phones? Do cars fly? Are we on horses only? Is there armor on people or not? Does it actually work, or is it just for show? I mean, you have to do lots of things in the first few pages of a script, and this is especially true if your story isn't taking place in what would normally be modern times. You must ground the reader and give them some rules of the world. Mistake number 3, failing to establish the tone. When I was first starting out as a screenwriter, I had a script that was making the rounds and getting a lot of read requests, but it kept getting a pass, and I couldn't figure out why until I got some notes from a showrunner friend. My first scene was actually great. It was solid, but it implied a horror comedy because the banter between the characters was fun and funny, but the events that happened were kind of gruesome. However, the rest of the script was more of an action-adventure, stuff I like to write. So readers that liked the first scene over here, this horror comedy, they felt like they were duped because then they got an action-adventure. And readers who were looking for the action-adventure were turned off because of the first horror comedy scene. In essence, the tone on page 1 was wrong. So whatever the tone is for your whole script, make sure your first scene not only matches that tone, but is a great example, a microcosm of sorts, for the tone of your entire film. Let the reader know what they're getting into and stick to that tone throughout. Mistake number 4, bad character intros. If you're only describing their looks along with hair, wardrobe, and makeup things, okay, that's trouble. If you spend too much time introducing characters that won't be in the story beyond that scene, but you're short shrifting the introduction of your main character, that's also a problem. If you introduce too many characters at once that make it near impossible for anyone to track with, especially if you're doing all the other stuff, you're getting a pass. Readers don't mind being confused about what is happening, but they hate being confused about who it's happening to and whether that character is important to the story or not. So we're on page 1. There is no way to know who is important or not except for how you introduce those characters. So here's page 1 of The Dark Knight. And while the Nolan brothers introduce quite a few characters, they make it clear that these are throwaway characters. We don't have to track them beyond the scene. Dopey, Happy, Grumpy, Chuckles, and Bozo. We can't really tell them apart, but how it's laid out on the page reassures us that we don't have to know. It's a bunch of clowns doing non-clown stuff, and we're interested and engaged. So lock up your character introductions because they do a couple of things. They get readers into the story when they get an idea of who a character is, and a good character intro is what I would call actor bait. You're dangling a good, juicy character in front of an actor, and they want to play good, juicy characters. Mistake number 5, no unique voice. The biggest tell of this one is when the writing is just too formal. It's almost academic. Okay, like someone is following a style guidebook like you had to for English papers in college, and everything is stiff and wooden and fits in this, like blah, 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 blah. Sentences are too formal. You're using formal writing conventions like semicolons. I mean, most people use those incorrectly anyway, and your writing feels like anyone could have written it. But when you write, your script should sound distinctively you. Like you are the only one who can tell the story. Like you are the one who's been charged by the universe to tell it. And it should feel conversational. Like you're telling your friend about this story and doing your best to keep them engaged the whole time. So have fun with it and use your own unique voice. If you don't have one, you need to get one. And the best way to hone your unique writing voice is to write a lot. Do practice exercises and scenes. Write a new screenplay and stop working on that one you've been working on for the last 5 years. You're so focused on making that one script good that you're failing to make you good, which should be your goal, because then once you're good, you'll know how to fix that one script. Find ways to hone your voice. If you want some practice, I'll email you a writing prompt every day for 30 days. It's called Jumpstart, completely free. If you want something more robust, consider my Fast Track course, which includes some writing assignments and practice exercises along the way, some of which I give feedback on. Links for both of those are below if you're interested. Mistake number 6, bad grammar. This is showing up on the date without your hair done and appropriate clothes on. It communicates you don't care. It communicates you aren't a professional. And if you're trying to get your script read, then you're trying to be a professional screenwriter and get paid for writing a script. So if you have bad grammar, it's an immediate turnoff. Most readers are aspiring writers themselves, or they've read a lot and they love story and words, and nothing pisses them off faster than someone submitting a script because they want to be a screenwriter, but who doesn't know basic grammar, who seemingly doesn't care. I'm not talking about the random typo. Those happen, although you really should strive to not have any grammar mistakes on page 1. I'm talking about careless writing and uninformed application of grammar rules. And you can easily avoid this one. If you don't know grammar and you want to be a writer, you just have to learn. Mistake number 7, bad format. The cousin to bad grammar. Again, it shows you don't know what you're doing or that you don't care. Now, I know there are no rules when it comes to format, but there are conventions of formatting that all screenplays use. Slug lines, all caps when introducing characters, specific formatting for characters speaking and the words they say. As long as you both get the basics right and are consistent with how you apply anything else, you'll be fine. So for this one, follow conventions, and when you deviate, be consistent. Mistake number 8, overt camera directions. Most writers forget that the script you're writing is a script that's meant to be read, not one that's meant to be shot. And even more importantly, you more than likely aren't going to direct it. Now, back in the day, camera directions used to be included in scripts, so if you find sample screenplays, even from 10, 15 years ago, they will have more camera directions in there. But now, camera directions just scream newbie writer, and that makes it easier to pass on your script. And candidly, there are more sophisticated ways of directing cameras if you feel you really need to do that. But just don't do it overtly on page 1. Resist the temptation, and if they're in your current draft, remove them. And this mistake is corollary to mistake number 9, scene numbers. When a script is finished and bought and ready to go into production, it is locked. As a result, scene numbers are added to every slug line. The reason for this is because it's needed for production. There's so many people working on so many different things, there has to be a way of keeping things straight. So scenes and pages are locked, and planning begins based on scene numbers. This is the production script for Arrival, and note page 21 and scene 34. But the next page is 21A, because something was added to the scene before the next locked page. The next page, actually page 22, continues the scene, but again, page 22A extends the scene because something was added. Then we get back on track for the next page, 23, but notice scene 36 at the bottom. On the next page, we get scene A36, a newly added scene. This is a locked script, and you shouldn't do it. Because when you lock your script and add scene numbers, it confuses readers because they see scene numbers and their first thought is,
why am I reading a production script?
And then when they realize it isn't a production script, they know you don't have any idea what you're doing because you've locked the script. And now they're looking for any excuse to kick your script. Plus, you come across as a pretentious writer, which just feeds a stereotype. So no scene numbers, unlock your script, and don't lock it again until you've cashed the check and the producer or director has given the okay to lock it. Mistake number 10, no reason to turn the page. One of the storytelling tools you have at your disposal is white space. And if you're writing scenes like you should, there will be something at the bottom of page 1 that lends itself to a sort of cliffhanger, mystery, or something like that, that would make a reader want to turn the page to find out what happens. But writers a lot of times are just thinking about the words on the page and not the experience of reading. When you binge watch a TV show, you think, one more episode, but it ends on a cliffhanger, and you need to watch the next episode. So just one more episode. And then suddenly it's 3 a.m. Okay, reading your script should have the same experience, at least for the first couple of pages, and definitely at the bottom of page 1. There should be a compelling reason to turn the page, and then try to keep that up for several of the first 10 pages, because the reader will suddenly find themselves on page 33 and think, this is awesome! Another look at The Dark Knight. We've got clowns with weapons and fun names, and at the bottom of page 1, they pull over in front of Gotham National First Bank. Ooh, a bank robbery. This will be fun. Let's see how this goes down. Turns the page. So do what you need to do and use white space to your advantage. Make things breezy and quick to read, and make sure the bottom of page 1 gives a reason to turn the page. But this leads to mistake number 11. It's too dense. Okay, in an effort to have a cliffhanger, writers sometimes compact and combine things, and then looking at page 1 of a screenplay looks no different than page 1 of a novel. Spread things out, and not just on page 1. This extends through the entire script. You want the whole script, not just page 1, to feel easy and quick to read, but you definitely want that on page 1.
But then my script will be too long.
Okay, here's the ugly truth, and this may sting a little bit. Scripts that are too long are the result of one of 3 things. 1, an improperly structured story. 2, an improperly structured story. And 3, this may come as a surprise, but an improperly structured story. I guarantee if your script is too long or even too short, It's a structural issue, and your story is not working like it should. Once you learn how to structure a story properly, you'll never have issues with page count again. So if your script is too long, it's a structural issue, which you should fix before submitting it anyway. If your script is too dense, especially on page 1, spread it out. Let the white space on the page win. And mistake number 12, the one that will literally result in an automatic pass, is if you have no conflict on page 1, which in some ways brings us back to mistake number 1, starting in the wrong place. Your morning routine has no conflict, but every story has conflict. Just think about this. You never sit down and tell your friends or significant other about the details of your day, of something that went exactly as it should have gone. That's boring. You only tell them about the anomalies, the craziness, the random things, the things that got your blood boiling or that got someone else's blood boiling. It's like watching a car wreck. We don't want to watch, but we can't look away. And you need conflict in your story from page 1, literally within the first quarter of a page. No conflict means nothing is happening, and the reader is thinking, great, this is gonna be a boring read, and they don't even give it a chance, if they even make it to page 2. So start your conflict on page 1. And in this video, I walk through different types of conflict and how you can stack conflict for maximum results in your screenplay. And don't forget about the links below if you want my help.